What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Yesterday, Dragon Age the Veilguard launched, and we now have some preliminary numbers to give us an idea where this entry will land in accordance with some of the previous Dragon Age games, and we'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Nintendo Music, as some controversy appears to have hit this new application from Nintendo, specifically when it comes to some of the crediting involved. And then we also have this odd shakeup that's hit not only Sony, but also Xbox with some of their more anticipated upcoming titles. So if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members to the channel do get Newswave early. If you would like to learn more about that, click the join button down below this video. And we're going to start today with Call of Duty Black Ops 6, which did release at the end of last week. And I have been playing this game quite a bit in terms of the multiplayer, and I have also been going through the campaign, which is actually one of the better campaigns I've played in quite some time. Certainly a lot better than Modern Warfare 3, last year's entry. Well, we now have at least indication as to how it's doing. We can see this is posted up on their official account. They say, "Thank you, Call of Duty community, for making the launch of Black Ops 6 one for the record books, setting new day one and opening weekend records. Is #1 total players, #1 hours played, #1 total matches. In fact, sales appear to be up quite substantially, even on PlayStation, where there's not Game Pass, say, but even on Xbox, sales are pretty good. It seems to be above previous entries. Yeah, it doesn't appear that Game Pass in general has negatively affected Call of Duty sales, this being apparently like the biggest one they've had so far. And I will say some of that does have to go with them going back, I should say, to Black Ops in general. That is a very strong brand within Call of Duty. So leading up to it, it seemed pretty obvious it was going to do well. And this is just with the standard premium, quote unquote, release. People are still waiting to hear about the next season, the big Warzone launch that would incorporate things like the Black Ops 6 mechanics. So that will also be another big launch, most likely before the end of this year. So yeah, it seems like Call of Duty is rolling along, and Game Pass appears to have gotten a bit of a push too. So at least for now, things working out well for Microsoft in that Activision acquisition. Oh, and here's a bit of a warning for all of you retro gamers out there, specifically with a PlayStation Portable. As you can see this image, people are realizing that the batteries are puffing up. This is from David, who showed off the result of their battery, as I guess it was just sort of in storage in a drawer somewhere. And I mean, this happens with batteries in general. They can at times malfunction and puff up or swell like this. And sometimes you'll see it even leak out the side of it. In this case, the PSP battery is encased in plastic, but I've actually seen this quite a bit. Swollen PSP batteries is nothing new. And the good news here is you can just pop it out. It's very easy to get to. It's not like phones or even handhelds now, like a Switch Lite or a Switch in general, where you have to do some actual work to get the thing open. Very, very easy here with that tab. And actually, I would recommend then, if that happened to you, maybe try to find one of those extended batteries, although you're most likely going with like a third-party company that could be hit or miss. So it's already kind of hard enough to find a reliable battery. I mean, years and years and years after the thing's been considered legacy by Sony. But if you haven't checked in on your PSP in quite some time, whether it's in a drawer or in storage, you may want to check to see how the battery's doing. And if you are going to put a handheld like this in the storage that has an easily accessible battery, I'd actually recommend just popping that battery out in the first place and storing it separately, because it can go very, very wrong, and you can have actual leakage and stuff happen within the system and do damage to it. But just a heads up, check it on your PSP. Oh, and we do have embargo dates for the PlayStation 5 Pro, which is coming up this week, and I'm pretty excited to get mine. But we can see this is Tom Henderson's post saying that the unboxings will happen November 4th, and then the full reviews will happen November 6th, which, yeah, my unboxing review and just overall video for it will happen on just release day. I'm gonna go pick it up, or actually no, mine's coming from PlayStation Direct. So whenever FedEx decides to drop it off at the front door, I'll bring it in and start checking it out. So I have some videos I wanted to make about the device, and of course, we'll break it down and see exactly what's going on inside of the system, which is something I'm very curious about. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Dragon Age the Veilguard, which has been quite the controversial release online, and I notice it a lot when things get posted up about it, whether it's even Digital Foundry's video. There's a lot of arguing happening in the comments for it with a wide-ranging number of reasons. But I wanted to go over something that is happening with Dragon Age the Veilguard now when it comes to a sales perspective, and why I think there's a better than not chance that EA will actually issue a press release next week touting some of the sales figures for this game. But first, let's go over what's happening here when it comes to Steam. So the game, of course, came out yesterday, pretty much Thursday afternoon is what we were seeing here with that launch, and originally it started out roughly 45,000 or so concurrent players on Steam when it first came out, and we can see, at least at the time of this recording, the concurrent player count peak was 70,414 players. Again, this being on a Thursday. I keep saying that because typically you would see overall concurrent player count on a launch week peak during the weekend. It's just when more people are off or have time, as opposed to having to go to work and do adult stuff and that sort of thing during the week. So that's what I would more or less pay attention to here, is just how do things pan out, say on Saturday and Sunday, and where does it land exactly. We also see some of the reviews coming in for it when it comes to users, and it's sitting mostly positive at this time. So, I mean, again, based on what I've been seeing online, that's probably a positive there for what EA was maybe even expecting on it. But we also see over on PlayStation Store, it was running as like number 1, number 2 spot in terms of new selling games. And I haven't seen the Xbox charts update at this time, but I have a feeling it'll probably be around the top there as well. Now on Steam, that number that they've turned in, just over 70,000 players, is actually the best launch they've ever seen on Steam, that being EA. But keep in mind, it's been a more recent thing for them to launch their games on Steam, since they kind of left Steam for a long time and were just launching on their own PC launcher, just recently kind of returning to it. I guess the one right before this that was the highest would have been Jedi Survivor. That was around 67,000 or so players on launch. Now going into next week, let's say over the weekend, we see this game crack, I'm going to say, a bit over 100,000 concurrent players as its peak. I think there's a very good chance that, coupled with PlayStation and Xbox sales, that this thing will probably come in around maybe 1.5 to 2 million copies sold in its first week. And if that happens, that would be enough for EA to most likely issue a statement or a press release or just a post on Twitter saying that it is the fastest selling game in Dragon Age history, the entire franchise. That's all it really needs to do that. Dragon Age Inquisition eventually got to 12 million copies sold, but it took quite a while for that to happen. So this is another case here where maybe just over time that could happen here too. But I do think just the overall sales velocity, mostly because they were able to release it on Steam day one with no DRM and really leaning into things like the Steam Deck, I think will help this game initially. So don't be shocked if that happens. It seems like people are convinced that this game is just going to completely flop right away. This is a game that was always going to sell well initially because it's Dragon Age. Like, it's a storied franchise that has not had a new entry in roughly 10 years, and reviews weren't like 60s, you're not gonna be able to play this game, it's terrible. Nothing like that. So for a lot of people who just want a new Dragon Age game, or just are interested in it because of the way it looks, hey, there's dragons on the front, you're swinging swords and casting magic, maybe I'll try it out. That's enough. We have to remember, a lot of the people you talk to or interact with online are very plugged in. There's a ton, way more people who are just in the mainstream who don't really pay attention to anything on Twitter or really even YouTube, maybe occasionally to look things up for walkthroughs, and that's about it. So I expect Dragon Age actually next week to have some good news when it comes to sales from EA. Next up, let's talk about a shakeup that's hit PlayStation and Xbox. These are two games that are highly anticipated, upcoming. And I saw this and I had to like double take a bit here. It's a very odd situation, but we can see this is posted up. This is from Stephen Totillo over on GameFile. Does very good work there. I would check out the full article here and the site itself, but they say Brian Horton, who was publicly named as the creative director of Sony Insomniac's upcoming Marvel Wolverine PS5 game in 2021, has been off the project since the summer. Two sources familiar with the matter told GameFile. The game is now being helmed by creative director Marcus Smith. A rep for Sony Interactive Entertainment has confirmed to GameFile. Mike Daly will serve as Wolverine's new game director. They previously worked on Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. The changes atop the Wolverine development team are the result of creative decisions around the game. Horton is now the new creative director for Perfect Dark, and will be bringing his wealth of experience to the upcoming reboot of the classic Secret Agent series, an Xbox rep confirmed to GameFile. So this is very odd stuff. We have the creative director for Wolverine leave due to creative differences and is now working as the creative director at Perfect Dark. And you have Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, the creative directors there, the people who are working on that, moving in now for Wolverine, which it kind of felt like Wolverine was getting at least close to being shown again. There was actually a rumor going around that it was very close and we might see it before the end of this year, which sort of lines up, I think, with the Game Awards. Pretty good idea there, maybe to show it, to even remind people that it's still a thing. But we saw like the entire Insomniac leaks going around and stuff, so we at least have a general idea as to how the structure of the game's gonna be. A lot of that stuff that was out there was just missing textures and many of the animation marks and stuff, so very rough footage, sure, but the fact that this is happening and they're going over to Perfect Dark, it's very strange. And the one that actually makes me really wonder is, where exactly is Perfect Dark in its development? Because it does feel like we saw that thing forever ago, and then we saw it again, but no date, no year, nothing. So when you see changes like these with creative directors, it does make you question the timeline for a game, and now we're actually questioning it for two big titles that a lot of people are at least looking forward to. So here's hoping we'll at least see maybe Wolverine at the Game Awards before the end of this year, so we can at least get an idea as to when Insomniac's going to be ready to launch that thing, maybe going into 2025? Well, that was the poll question I actually had, so we'll see where many of you fall on it. Next up, let's talk about the Nintendo Music app once again. We already went over it launching yesterday in Newswave, but something else has come up here as people have had a chance to use the application, and we can see this posted up. This is over on GameDeveloper.com. It says there's one catch: the app doesn't credit any composers. If you log into the app and pick a song, the track information button just has the name, the game it appears in, and a Nintendo copyright notice. That's kind of it. And as this was going around, especially yesterday online, some were trying to explain, I guess, just the way that, like, the cultural differences in for example, in Japan when it comes to game development and crediting and stuff. And unfortunately, I can't really speak on that at all, just being in the US when it comes to like what Japanese culture would be around something like this. But I do actually see something like that they're missing out on functionally for the application. And that does come down to the different composers. One, I mean, you could get to know the composer, you could learn who was composing these different tracks and stuff for Nintendo's history, but also it would kind of be a fun way to discover not only new music, but also new games. Let's say you can take the composer's name and have that plugged in as your playlist, or you're shuffling between different songs that they worked on. That would actually be pretty cool to just be able to follow along with their career path or their journey as to them making different songs for different genres or game types. And it just seems like something that's a pretty big omission for what I think is an application that works to just bring maybe like video games to people who aren't necessarily playing as like games all the time. I'm still trying to wrap my head around Nintendo's strategy with this because it is linked to NSO, but it's not on the Switch. And not necessarily that people are going to just use this application primarily on the Switch. I think the phone idea is good to try to reach a ton of people, but it would also be a way to reach people who maybe aren't familiar with the different composers for these songs, and it seems like something that would actually just add a lot to the application. So I don't know if that's something Nintendo will add in the future. I'm assuming not, because they didn't do it here to start with, but yeah, very strange and unfortunate omission for there to be no composers and authors or anything for some of these works in this application. That's really, again, there to explore the history of Nintendo with a lot of the music for their games. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about that PlayStation 5 Pro, as there was a new interview that was published with Variety with the two CEOs, the co-CEOs for PlayStation. We can see this is posted up over on their website, and it's an excerpt from that interview that I wanted to pull because it also gives us an idea as to the timeline of the PS5 Pro. So, as I mentioned, they were interviewing Herman Holst and Hideaki Nishino. In this case, Nishino answered saying, we started working on PS5 Pro even before PS5 launches. It was another 5-year project for us. I've talked to you guys about this many, many times, that a game console, when it comes to fruition, it's introduced, it's launched in the market. it's actually like lagging behind in terms of planning and stuff by multiple years, and many times when a system launches, the next one is being worked on. In this case, it was before the PS5 even came out. They say there was a conversation around whether we wanted to do another Pro or not. But the main thing was, there are technologies we can grow up in 3 years' time or 5 years' time. So the innovation and technology advancement is more quicker in a modern world. Phones are updating every year. PCs are updating every year. I don't think we'd go every year updates, but there are things we can package together to bring the greatest things into game console segment range. So that's the vision. And people have talked about the idea of having game console upgrades mimic phones to where it's every year, every other year. I actually don't think that's even possible, just based on the R&D that goes into some of the jumps and advancements we see for these different consoles, like a Pro console. I guess you could do very, very small revisions like a screen change, but even then, you have to change many of the dimensions around the casing, and it has to work with some of the previous stuff, like example is that Switch OLED still has to work with the dock, right? Still to fit in the confines of that. Still has to work with the Joy-Cons that you have already. Maybe certain accessories, and it has to have the same inputs and stuff, and there's a lot that goes into planning and figuring this stuff out and then bringing it to market. And unfortunately, as we see here, that can be up to 5 years of planning and development. I guess the good thing here for the PS5 Pro is I do believe it gives us a window and a look into what Sony's plans are, maybe going forward for the PlayStation 6, as I think we are reaching the hardware limits as to what could go into one of these consoles and still be a quote-unquote reasonable price. And I kind of feel like they would be working to continue developing PSSR, their advanced upscaling technique with AI, and maybe we get to 2.0 and 3.0, and that's something that then launches with the PlayStation 6, so they could attack things like 8K gaming without having to tack on a $1,200 or $1,300 price point for the system. But yeah, the PS5 Pro, 5 years ago, started development. Before the base PS5. Before the base PS5 even launched. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, when do you think Wolverine will release on PS5? Okay, 2026 is the leading year here. Wow, okay, 2027 and 2028 are second and third, though. No confidence at all in 2025, which, the thing with Sony now I've noticed is they are doing that reveal to then release seemingly within the same year, almost, well, same 12 months period. So Ghost of Yote, we found out about that recently. Seems like it's going to come out minimum 12, like maybe within 12 months of its official announcement here. Wolverine was announced a while ago, sure. Maybe they're just waiting to the point where, okay, it is coming out in the next 6 or 7 months, and then we'll make that reveal. So it is something that could potentially be shown again, as I mentioned, at the Game Awards coming up, and then launch in 2025. But I think I'm going to probably lean towards 2026, mostly because we're still expecting, I feel like, a Venom spinoff for Spider-Man at some point, and maybe that would be the holiday 2025 release, which at that point would have Insomniac maybe look towards 2026 for Wolverine. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from OG Jakey, says, that is not how I read the Sony plate statement. It sounded more like they are just saying PS5 Pro specific covers will be for sale in the future. Yeah, I wanted to come back to this because I was checking out the comments, and I think people are correct. I had a more, we'll say, optimistic take on it, but yeah, the way it was worded once again here, I kind of saw it as, oh, okay, maybe they'll do some kind of exchange program for it, and looking back at it again, and then again, having people in the comments kind of correct it a bit, I think you're right in the sense that their exchange program is buy PlayStation 5 Pro plates. And I wanted to bring this up again because I feel like there are people out there who bought the disk drive, sure, like the external one for the PS5 Pro, but maybe they've also bought plates like blue or red or whatever, right? Thinking that they will work on the PS5 Pro, and maybe now they're going to hold on to them like, oh, an exchange program or something. No, I would try to return them as soon as possible then. That would be my advice. Don't hold on to them hoping that that would be a thing. Take it back to the retail store you got it from, see if you can send it back to PlayStation Direct, get your money back, and then hold out for the inevitable reveal that, yes, there will be PlayStation 5 Pro specific plates, because Well, in this case, Sony is gonna Sony. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card. Or maybe you wanted to hear more about the PlayStation 5 Pro or anything else happening at Sony, I'll leave the latest episode of Click R3 right below it. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.